let's start again. So welcome everyone. Take 2 of the impact of problem gambling. So I'm just driving the webinar on behalf of Carrie and Di. They just had a couple of sound issues on their end. So we'll just start here with the webinar goals.
Okay, what we'll be covering in today's webinar is organised into 3 main goals. So the first of these is looking at the impact of gambling on the individual, as in the person who gambles, how this impacts their relationships with partners, parents, children, friends, employees, employers and colleagues, and the health impacts from a physical and psychological view. We'll also look at the financial impacts for the person, family, direct community and the larger community of Queensland. We'll look at the screening process, what barriers inhibit effective screening and help seeking, and a variety of ways to access help, services, and practical ways of doing this with your client. The final goal is to bring awareness that legal services are in a unique position to assist the person with gambling problems. And while it may be a small percentage of your clientele, that by the end of this, you'll feel confident to identify some of the risk factors and signs, and that you'll feel equipped to screen and refer to best assist your client. So we'll look at our main points. So the main points that we'll be covering in detail is that gambling is considered a health problem. It's a recognized addiction in the American Psychiatric Society's Diagnostics and Statistics Manual 5th edition. So that is, we call that the DSM-5. It's often presenting as a problem with other health behaviours and can mask the gambling, and it has a ripple effect in our community. We'll look at how shame and stigma prevent people from being open about their problems with gambling and how this impacts help seeking. To address this, screening has been developed to be simple and non-shaming. The referral method and accessing help has also been specifically designed and streamlined for ease and to reduce shame and stigma. Throughout the webinar, we will follow 3 case examples that are based on people that have accessed help. So even though they may sound familiar, they are not based on any particular person to protect their identity and privacy. However, the examples may typify and do typify a typical person seeking gambling assistance and a legal presentation. So let's go in. Gambling is defined as the act of voluntarily staking something of value, usually money, on the outcome of an uncertain event. In Australia, we have many examples of this, such as two-up, toad races, who's going to win the heart of the latest bachelor, and who will score the first goal in a football match. Australians are pretty keen to bet on just about anything. So, however, the 4 main types of legal gambling are, and we'll move to the next slide, is gaming, which includes card games, casino games, and electronic poker machines. Betting, also called wagering, placing money on an outcome or a future event, such as a sports game or horse and dog races. Lotteries, which are lotto tickets, scratchies, raffles, bingos, and include prize homes and prize cars. Speculation, which is business, insurance, and stock markets, but in particular, the trading of options. So just to note that it's no longer formally considered a form of gambling, but some still consider it as a type of gambling. So just here, we were going to do our quick poll and see if, have you ever identified a client with a gambling being a contributing factor, whilst it may not have been disclosed? So we'll look at the yes, no, unsure. While those answers come on in, we'll start to have a look at some of the reasons why a person might start to gamble. Okay, so what we have is generally it's boredom, excitement, feeling depressed, a relationship breakdown, wanting to socialise, a belief in luck, wanting to escape, enjoying the entertainment, or experiencing financial hardship.
So I've just closed that poll now, and
Yep.
we'll just share the results up on the screen.
Great, that's really wonderful. So 100% of people that replied said yes, they have seen that. Okay. So we'll go over to the next slide there where we're talking about, some of the reasons, underlying reasons. That's the one. So while the initial reasons to start gambling are varied and can be even more varied than what we've just talked about, generally the problem gambling or high-risk gambling can be due to wanting to avoid unpleasant feelings by numbing out or by distracting with feelings of excitement. Okay, so we're going to meet our case studies now. So case study A is a single parent with no family living locally, recently divorced and has moved to a new area for a fresh start. She has a part-time job but hasn't developed a circle of friends. Feeling lonely, goes to a large venue that is vibrant and full of light and sounds for lunch and a pick-me-up. She decides to have a flutter on the pokies while staying there for a little bit longer. Case study B. He's a young man. He loves to play football and he plays several times a week. He has family and friends that come and watch him and really enjoy the whole environment together. However, after one game, he experiences a severe leg injury and is bedridden for close to 2 months, and on recovery learns that he won't play again. So wanting to still enjoy the game that he's always loved and feeling really disheartened that he can no longer play, he begins betting on the games to get that same feeling of the excitement that he would when he was playing. Case study C. We have a married mother who is experiencing loud and aggressive arguments that are becoming more and more violent. To avoid the arguments, she attends a local venue where it's not only open late, but there's food, drink service, security guards and cameras, and a courtesy bus to get her home safely. So as you can see, these 3 examples, the initial reasons for why they started to gamble are really varied, but the emotions and their circumstances are things that we can really empathise with. Okay, so we'll come back to them a bit later. Okay, in Australia, we love to have a gamble, like what we said before. Australians have the highest gambling expenditure per adult in the world. We have an average of $1,200 per year per adult. So this equates to a national spend of over $23 billion per year. So the highest form of gambling spending is on pokie machines. So they're also called electronic gaming machines or EGMs. And the ones in particular that have the highest spending on is the ones that are found in pubs and clubs. Online wagering has the least spending. However, the recent research coming out is showing that it's got a higher rate of problem gambling. So next slide. So as mentioned earlier, gambling is defined as an addiction. It's supported by research and is in the American Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual and Statistics Manual. Gambling elicits the same response in the brain as does cocaine. It releases high amounts of dopamine when experiencing a win. So it's been defined in Australia as a public health issue, and that the cost to the community a minimum of $4.7 billion. However, it's suspected to be up as high as $8 billion. So it can be really hard to define exactly how much it does cost because it's difficult to, people don't often disclose or don't identify it as being a problem. From a health perspective, gambling is defined on a spectrum from no risk through to low, medium, and high risk. The rate of high risk in the general population is between 0.5 and 1%, and medium risk being another 1 to 2%. This equates to roughly 3% of the general population. So we'll come back to that figure a bit later on. That's important to remember that. The actions of one problem gambler, negatively impacts the lives of between 5 and 10 other people. This means that there are up to 5 million Australians who are affected by problem gambling each year, including friends, family, employers, colleagues of the problem gambler. Next slide. When looking at people who play the pokies regularly, defined as at least once per week, 1 in 6 people have a high risk of problem gambling. Another 1 in 6 has a moderate problem, both of these being 15% of the pokey playing population. So that's 1/3 of the regular pokey players, remembering it's a scale, and many others are in the low risk category. So even though that's only 30% of the regular pokey playing population, they contribute over 70% of the gaming revenue. So it's really quite a lot. Okay, next slide. So people who have a problem with their gambling lose an average of $21,000 per year. So it's about 1/3 of the average annual salary. So it's hard-earned money that would otherwise be used for bills, paying off the rent or mortgage, taking the kids on a holiday. But it's not just about the money, it's about the harm that it causes themselves and their family. So problem gamblers can suffer mental and physical health problems. They find it difficult to hold down to employment, and they struggle to maintain relationships. For many families, the biggest loss is the quality of time together. And so that can never really be recovered. People with gambling problems are 6 times more likely than non-gamblers to get divorced. They are 4 times more likely to suffer from alcohol abuse and 4 times as likely to smoke daily than non-gamblers. They're also twice as likely to attempt suicide than people with other addictions. Okay, moving to the next one. So just briefly going through each, there's health problems such as stress, self-esteem and confidence, mood disorders, and that can lead into physical health problems. Next. There are impacts for work, so the distraction impacts the ability to focus at work. Lying and so forth can also impact the ability to maintain work. Next. Inability to pay their bills. And next. Theft and fraud. We'll get to those in more detail later. Interpersonal problems, and just pausing here for a moment. Children with parents who are problem gamblers are up to 10 times more likely than, to develop a problem with gambling themselves than children with non-problem gambling parents. So what they report is that they sell their valuables or hawk them to get money to gamble. They borrow money from others. They're unable to meet their loan repayments. They commit illegal acts, and there's a loss of job, and they lie with lying to hide the gambling. Next one over. Gaming venue staff are at an increased risk of developing a problem with gambling as well. They're 6 times more likely than people from the general public. So this is thought to be due to the exposure of the winds and being desensitized of the lights and sounds that the poker machines make. And finally, this places an increased cost on the community in general in how that we have to support then the individual and their family. Next slide. So to summarise that, the harmful effects of gambling, the persons presenting with high-risk gambling have a high rate of other health problems such as depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicide attempts. Okay, we'll check back in with our case studies. So case A has increased cigarette smoking. She's often smoking in favour of eating, so she's dropped a lot of weight. She's basically living off the free coffee and sandwiches that are provided at the gaming venue. The meals that she's giving the kids are most often just bread and maybe some tinned beans and spaghetti. So the feelings of shame that she's not being able to feed the children properly only spurs her to go back to the pokies and play even more, trying to get that big win that's going to solve all the problems. And she gets the next week's pay, but then she plays that again, going all in. Then she ends up getting advances on her weekly pay, borrowing money from family and friends to pay for bills, but that's when the lies start. She uses explanations like, I didn't have the money because I had to buy new tyres this week, or I had to pay for a school excursion, but instead she's actually asking for just a little bit more money so she can go play for the pokies as well. So case study B. So he's had a couple of big losses and he's fallen behind on his bills, and he's not wanting to explain to his partner why. So he gets a payday loan to pay the bill, but instead he puts that onto that night's football game as well. So after losing it all, he's just filled with stress and panic and shame, and he's not wanting to tell his partner, so he gets really snappy and angry whenever she raises the topic of money. So there's a real layering of guilt. He doesn't know what to do, and so he really starts having lots of suicidal thoughts, feeling like that's the only way out and the only way he can stop hurting the people he cares about. And C. Case study C, she's smoking a lot more cigarettes and drinking a lot more, and one night she's offered to use some ice. So she takes it to numb out from the stress of her home life and the financial problems that her whole family is now experiencing. The anxiety builds as the addictions layer, and fearing that none of it is going to go away, she attempts suicide but ends up being hospitalised. So with her mounting health problems and unhelpful coping behaviours, this only fuels the arguments at home and the violence increases. This is when child safety become involved and the children are removed from her custody. So as you can see, these examples, they might feel extreme, but they're actually all too common. So the challenge from a public health perspective is that it's only a small percentage of problem gamblers that ever seek help, and that's of any form. So it's only around that 8 to 15%. And this is much lower than people who suffer from other substance use disorders. To the next slide. So just asking if anyone knows why they think that problem gambling, why there's such a barrier to seeking help. But we'll just let those come through, and if Carly wants to read them out, if any of those come through.
So for everyone listening at home, you can just pop your response into the chat box or the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. So just answering that question there based on what you might have seen speaking with clients or just general knowledge. So shame's come through as one of the reasons there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Shame's a massive one. Okay, and we can move on to the next slide, and if any more come through, we can touch on those. Okay, so help seeking most often occurs when harm is imminent or has begun. And in most cases, this is the loss of the significant relationship or legal proceedings. So before this, the gambler often has difficulty acknowledging the problem, believing that they'll be able to resolve it themselves, or that they'll just get the big win next time and then it'll be done. So many feel that seeking treatment is only as a last resort, and that they believe that they should be able to stop at any time, which is always, maybe tomorrow I'll figure it out. So others also feel that it would bring shame to their family or ruin their relationship if they admit it. They'd rather work it out themselves, believing they got themselves into the mess, so they'd rather get themselves out. So treatment or counselling is also often misunderstood, and even just attending counselling can in itself raise stigmas.
Carrie, we've just got another response that's come through. So Bill's just mentioned that in addition to shame, there could be stigma or denial as well.
That's right, yes. Yep, stigma, denial, shame, all very big, yeah. So we'll come back to how we can address the denial aspect of that a little bit further on. It's a really good point. In the next, here we are, yep. Access to venues, that's been really streamlined to really address the shame and stigma issues. You'll find that many gambling help services will be co-located with other services so that the person isn't seen walking off the street into a gambling help venue. But what the research shows is there's actually the psychological barriers that are the most problematic, and they're also the most difficult to overcome from a public health perspective. Okay, next slide. So this is where there's a unique crossover with gambling problems and contact with the legal service. So often someone with a problem, a high-risk gambling problem, they generally maybe only have one contact with a professional, if at all. So research in prisons has found that an average of 33% of the prison population self-reports as having a moderate to high-risk gambling problem. So already that's higher than the general public. So remember back earlier on, it was that up to 3% of the general population. So some prisons even reported up to 70%. Again, using the self-report assessment tool, which we'll look at in a minute, there's approximately 10% have high-risk gambling and reported committing an illegal act to fund their gambling. So again, this is much higher than the 1% of high-risk gamblers in the general population. So next slide. So the most common legal presentations that a person with gambling problems may be seeking legal services for are divorce or a relationship breakdown, domestic violence, theft, fraud, drug and alcohol crimes, and assault. Time to check back in with our case studies. Okay, so case A, she did not declare her earnings to Centrelink for over 10 years, also not submitting tax returns, over that time accruing over $70,000 in overpayment from Centrelink. So case A sought help when the youngest child turned 18 and could no longer claim parenting support payments and needed to make some changes in her earning capacity. So case A sought help when faced with the need to submit her tax returns and the legal consequences became imminent. Case B. Case B stole over $20,000 from his employer, at first just taking small amounts and promising himself that he'd pay them back next week, or when he got the next big win or when he sorted things out. The employer soon became aware and pressed charges. At risk of losing his partner and the strong encouragement of his parents, Case B sought help when he was released from prison, serving time for theft. Case C, she started selling ice to fund her gambling behaviours. After serving time in prison for possession and supply of illegal substance, she sought counselling as part of her treatment plan to regain custody of her children. So again, these are not specific cases, but they are a bit of an amalgamation of quite a number of cases that we've come across. Okay, on to the next slide. So how are you able to help? So being aware that problem gambling is steeped in shame and is often concealed, clients may have great difficulty being open and can continue to avoid or be in denial, avoid acknowledgement or downplay the severity of the problem. The most effective way of raising the subject with a person includes being non-judgmental, discussing gambling as a behaviour, so externalising it from the person themselves, and discussing the harm that it may be creating in the person's life. So techniques for doing this are called motivational interviewing questions, and they seek to acknowledge that looking at what the motivations are for maintaining gambling or to cease gambling or to reduce gambling. So moving on to direct questioning and screening. So using direct questions in a non-judgmental manner, it helps to normalise the gambling as a health problem that's creating issues in the person's life. So it also helps to assist in minimising evasive or avoidant answering, so being really direct. And I'll give an example a little bit further on how to do that. So if the client is unsure if the gambling is creating problems, the use of a screening tool can be useful in bringing acknowledgement and clarity. So we'll have a look at what that screening tool looks like. So this is called the Problem Gambling Severity Index, or the PGSI. And if we're able to, if Carly, you're able to click on that link, we'll have a look on the website where it is so that you can use that yourselves with your clients if needed.
Just going to bring that up now.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to want to link. Oops. Can you just read that one out for me?
It's gamblinghelponline.org.au.
There it is. Oh, no, doesn't want to bring it up, unfortunately.
Yep.
So I have to come back to that one.
Okay, no worries. So we'll have a look at the slide. Okay, so it's really it's quite simple and quite direct. It's only the 9 questions. The clients are then able to answer from no, not at all, through to so never, sometimes, most of the time, and almost always. So it gives a score of those questions, and anything above an 8 indicates a problem with gambling. So if you have a moment, it'd be great to have a little play on that website just so you can see what it's like. As you can see, the questions are really straight, quite direct, like, has your gambling caused any financial problems for you or your household? The one that asks about, where is it? So the number 9, have you felt guilty about the way you gamble or what happens when you gamble? That used to be, have you performed illegal acts to fund your gambling? But they've changed that question to be a bit more encompassing for everyone. And it still captures the data. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So Gambling Help is a free service. It offers face-to-face counselling, and it's all across Australia. So in Queensland, the majority of services are co-located with Relationships Australia. So there's also free and confidential 24/7 line that provides counselling, information and referrals for both gamblers and other people impacted. So there are self-help booklets and other printed information. You can get those by contacting that helpline, and they're also available and stocked in the gaming venues. We have also developed an online counselling service, and it seems to be really quite attractive to the young male population. And we're finding that about 70% of clients who are accessing this have not sought any other treatment previously. So the final slide there. Next slide, sorry. Okay, so the service is available for gamblers and their family and friends and anyone impacted by gambling. So that includes gaming stuff. Again, the referral criteria is as broad as that, anyone impacted by gambling. There's also financial counselling available for free, and the helpline is 24 hours, 7 days a week. Other services are Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Men's Helpline, Gamblers Anonymous, and financial counsellors. Next slide, please. And then we have specific services available for non-English speaking clients as well. We do often use the telephone interpreter service, the TIS service, and you can get more information if you have a non-English speaking client through our website there. So in summary, gambling is a significant health issue in Australia and for Australians. There are high rates of co-occurring conditions such as anxiety and depression, substance use and suicidality, and impacting a minimum of 5 people around them. Screening for problem gambling can be simple and by asking direct and externalizing questions such as, has your gambling ever created problems in your life? Or has the gambling you participate in have a negative impact on your relationships, work, finances, or stress levels? When gambling has been identified, remaining non-judgmental and offering referrals using motivational interview techniques can be really helpful. And there are a number of free and accessible support options in Australia, including face-to-face, telephone, internet, and self-help. In the next slide, the community education, what we do in the Gambling Help Service, we provide a number of different services in the community around, like I mentioned earlier, health promotion, early intervention programs, and helping venues also identify and assist problem gamblers. At the end there is a YouTube video, which is really quite a wonderful video to watch. As it says, a gentleman who just had a £5 free bet, and how that ended up in him losing everything. So if you did have a moment, that's also a really great one to have a look and get a personal account for it. So over to the question time, if there's any questions that anyone would have.
Okay, thanks so much for that. We're just going to go to questions now. So again, I'll just let you know that you can type your questions into the question box or the chat box just on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll see those ones come through. So there's already one here from Christine. So I'm just going to read that out for you, and hopefully everyone can hear. So should a financial counsellor conduct that questionnaire during an appointment to gauge how much of an impact gambling might have on that client if they have disclosed that they gamble? So what's your best suggestion there?
I think they could do that as a way of helping them. Generally, a lot of financial counsellors will work with them when the gambling has ceased, or so yeah, it's very sort of a case managed approach. So they might work in conjunction with the counsellor as well.
Fantastic. And look, that's a really good, that's a good thing to note, that hopefully once they're linked into a financial counsellor, they're more attuned to these issues, whereas perhaps CLC sector, they're initially speaking to perhaps an intake worker or an admin officer to arrange an appointment for some legal advice, and then they're speaking directly to the solicitor. So, you know, I think it's really important and helpful for solicitors to sort of keep an ear out for these kinds of things that might come up as well, particularly as CLCs do help with a lot of debt issues and other issues that, you know, are co-linked or, you know, happen at the same time as things around debt and gambling. So just keep an ear out. And do you think that would be helpful for solicitors to use that questionnaire as well? Because not everyone is able to maybe link into a financial counsellor on site.
Yes, absolutely. That questionnaire is designed to be used by anyone, anywhere, and again, it's really straightforward and it's really non-judgmental, really non-blaming. So yeah, that would be perfect if they felt comfortable to do that.
And they could actually just go into the website link, and apologies for that not working today, but if they went into the actual website, they can complete that as a survey and it produces a score. Is that right? Or do you need to manually
That's correct, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it produces a score immediately and gives an assessment of the risk factor, and gives an explanation around, you know, you may be experiencing some mild emotional and health problems due to stress related, or high,
So helpful, I think, especially if we've got solicitors doing that work and perhaps trained necessarily as counsellors, which they are unlikely to have been. I've got another question that's come through from Bill. So have you seen the impacts of gambling on adolescents? So I'm not sure if you want to speak to that as the adolescents who are gambling or adolescents of parents who are gambling. Maybe both.
Okay, so yeah, it's a bit of both. In terms of adolescents themselves, there are a number of different internet-based games or gaming that they are involved in. So there are, you know, things like skins that they trade and that sort of thing, and that has been researched and shown to be like a pathway towards later gambling behaviours. In terms of adolescents being exposed to gambling, it's like what I mentioned earlier, that they're 10 times more likely to develop a gambling problem themselves. So it's one of the key questions that we ask when we're doing our intakes is, you know, what was it like when you were growing up? Did you have a parent who gambled, or did you, you know, were you heavily involved in games?
Fantastic. good things to note. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so we don't have any more other questions that have come through at this point, Carrie. So I might end the webinar here. So on behalf of,
Okay.
oh, actually, no, every time I say that, we get one more. So thank you, Bill. That's great. He's just asked whether you have a list of info sources. So I'm not sure if that's for the
A
research
list of
included or if there's.
yes, there is a reference list on the back of the slide, so that includes the research around prisons. It's also got lots of links to different government websites where a lot of the research is shown.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. I've just put that up on the screen now, so hopefully you can see that if that's what you were referring to, just the references for the research today. Yep, he said thank you. That's great. So I'll just leave that up there for a moment and we'll do some wrapping up. So on behalf of everyone who's tuned in today and is listening to the recording, thanks so much, Carrie and Di, for dedicating your time to produce a really great session for us. I think hopefully that's, I found it very helpful, and I think that our CLC workers out there and other people tuning in, hopefully will be able to use this practical resource when they're working with their clients. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll have the recording up on our website probably tomorrow. I'd say I might just do a little bit of editing to make sure that it runs smoothly for everyone with the sound issues that we experienced early on. And I'll send that link out to you together with a link to an evaluation survey. So if you could fill that out as well. We'll be away next week at the CLCQ office down in Sydney for the NACLAC conference. So hopefully we'll see some of you there, and we'll be starting up our webinar program again in September. So thanks everyone, and make sure you do register. And thanks Carrie and Di once again.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.